Hillstead Museum in Farmington, Connecticut is a place where art and nature flourish together, just as the family that designed this estate intended. Hillstead is a colonial revival house built at the turn of the 20th century and maintained today just as it was when the family that built it lived here. Hillstead is their outstanding art collection. Hillstead is 150 acres of fields, trails, and scenic views. Hillstead is May Market and other seasonal events for the whole family. Hillstead is also a beautiful sunken garden, the site of the annual Sunken Garden Poetry Festival. This program and the ones that follow are an invitation to you to attend this summer's series of poetry and music events.
Welcome to Hillstead Museum. If you are a poetry lover or just appreciate an evening of the arts in a beautiful setting, come to Hillstead Museum this summer for the Sunken Garden Poetry Festival. The festival offers poetry and music on 3 Wednesday evenings and 2 Sunday afternoons all summer long. People love the informality and outdoor setting of this festival. You can bring lawn chairs or blankets, pack a picnic, or buy dinner and wine from the vendors here. There's an hour of live music first, anything from jazz to folk to classical, and then you can hear some of the best poets in the country read poetry that is relevant and accessible. One of the country's leading poetry events, the festival introduces audience to U.S. and state poets laureate, Pulitzer Prize winners, and other major American poets in the intimate, informal setting of this historic garden. The festival's ongoing popularity is evidence that poetry still holds an important place in American culture, and that poetry has a unique power to remind us of our own common humanity.
For this series of television programs, we have picked readings from the summer of 2015. We hope they will give you an idea of what it's like to spend an evening or an afternoon in the Sunken Garden at Hillstead. And we hope you'll join us in the summer of 2016. This summer, Hillstead welcomes the following headlining poets. On Wednesday, June 22nd, Heather McHugh. On Sunday, July 10th, Brian Turner. On Wednesday, July 20th, Edward Hirsch. On Sunday, August 7th, United States Poet Laureate Juan Felipe Herrera. And on Wednesday, August 17th, Kwame Dawes and the winners of the annual Hillstead Fresh Voices Student Poetry Competition.
Since 1993, student poets from all corners of Connecticut have entered this competition and mentoring program and have been given the incredibly powerful opportunity of reading here with some of the greatest writers in the world. Our young poets have shared this podium with the likes of, and I'll name a few of them just to give you an idea, Patricia Smith, James Merrill, Carolyn Forche, Richard Wilbur, Natasha Trethewey, Philip Levine, Sonia Sanchez, Galway Cannell, Maxine Kuhlman, Stanley Kunitz, and many, many others. It's absolutely astonishing that so many literary luminaries have read in this space, and equally astonishing that so many of our high school poets have been able to share the podium with these great artists.
Next, I'm going to give a little bit of my family history in poetic form. This poem is based mostly on stories I've heard from various familiar sources over the years, along with some Googling to fill in the gaps. It's called Genealogy. I swim illogical in the water of my 5 times great-grandmother's womb. In Ireland, the potatoes rot deep purple. In Austria, the revolutions fail. They're wet dynamite in the face of kings like the Habsburgs who hold their power with melting fingers. The branches of their tree curve inward on themselves like a hunchback's arms, like an alligator's teeth meant for meat. Like my Southern Baptist 3 times great-grandfather who managed his anger like he managed his alcohol. Not at all. who blasted his wife from behind with a shotgun and stuffed her in a burlap bag that once held fresh oranges. To my great-great-great-grandmother at the bottom of the Okefenokee swamp, let the peat absorb your bones. Not that you have a choice. The microbes will keep you company, like how slabs of meat keep a butcher sane. My great-grandfather, the New Orleans Jew, was known to talk to the headless corpses of his chickens like friends before he cleaved their bodies into parts. Breasts and thighs, what first caught his eye on my great-grandmother. Rumor has it he was no good with his knife, closed up shop each day with a new gash on his arm. When they were too deep, he howled to his wife upstairs, who stitched him together herself, clucking at him like a mother hen. Her specialty is Oxford commas. The struggle with copy editing is Sisyphean, in a gray desk all day and too exhausted to read novels or poetry, but it pays for her 4 kids. She gave birth to 5, but the first died after just 1 day. She only had half a diaphragm, so her organs floated up like they were filled with helium. She should have had more time. Father comforts her, and she smiles. Their hair grazed in sync.
This next piece is inspired by my interest in ecology and my favorite patch of earth in Vermont, where I often visit. Barnet, Vermont, lies patched like a farmer's overalls along the foothills where the hayfields turn yellow and the stands of birch and spruce hold the last guilty snow. You saw the stone walls last spring, how they tucked like gophers into the tangled hedgerow, tagged with juniper, frosted grapes, and bittersweet that still rustles even in these hours when the first wanderers print a trail of footmarks, like type, across the pasture down to the banks of the icy brook. When the light retreats behind the broad shoulders of Harvey Mountain, the blue dark slips into the valley, and the last visible clusters of soaked grass once again smudge the hard crust. March days always return with these questions of lasting and forbearance, when we lose our grasp of words and time, and melt the promises kept by the tiny white buds of cattails and timothy.
My second poem is called Headlights and Headlines. Little boy, I need you to go pick your hopscotch heart up off the pavement, wipe off the skin's knees and sunburns, and put it back where it belongs before you can't anymore. Put your heart back in your chest before the roots of your stomach fill a space in your ribcage with brambles instead of love. You're not little anymore. Your heart bled out in the back of your dresser drawer, and your chest is full of thorns and broken glass, tugging at your bones like prisoners tug at iron bars. Your body is a jailer. Your mind is a grave. It looked like a garden once. But you took a match to the flowers looking for praise. The flames didn't quite sound like applause. And I should have known you were a collision warning. Running down the sidewalk, half torn between chasing the street lamps home or finding God in a blur of headlights. I guess when you want to die, gunshots all sound like a funeral procession. You were the victim, the crime scene, and the murderer, all at once. I don't know if I can forgive you for that. More than anything, I want to forget, but you have made a name for yourself, carved each syllable into the ground beneath my feet, and now I'm walking on your deathbed, remembering how you used to name storm clouds after disasters and thinking that maybe I'll name one after you. I want you to tell me, How is a boy who drains his dreams crimson onto the carpet still smiling bright enough to topple mountains? How are you still anchored in my head, writing songs about the person you never got to be? It wasn't supposed to be this way. You wouldn't want me to cry for you, but I have, and I will. How am I supposed to take a bullet for you when you have a gun? I know that one day I'm going to forget what you looked like, and right now that hurts more than any bullet ever could. There's such a thing as holding on too tight, and maybe I am. Maybe I need to let go of the thread of a boy who was never really there to begin with. But words only work if you use them. So I'll use the words I have. Goodbye. Thank you.
I'm going to bring Brooklyn to Sunken Garden, and hopefully Brooklyn is welcomed here. And this poem is called Give My Regards to Brooklyn. On the humble, I be having these dreams where I'm people watching with Basquiat, sitting on Bedford Ave, sipping piraguas, talking about never thought I'd live to see the day. Could have sworn I saw Otis Blackwell walking out the corner store in Atlantic Ave, smoking a Lucy, whistling a new tune for Elvis to cover. And it was gully right because I caught Biggie on a stooping Bed-Stuy selling dope to a hipster with Ready to Die tatted across the pale of his arm. Hadn't seen a hoopty in a while when old dirty bastard pulled up, offered me a ride to the pink houses, and suddenly a handsome mocha man sitting on a nearby fire escape calls my name. I could tell it was Jackie by the Dodger stitched across his chest. He told me, I miss home, and then it all fades to black. When I woke, the blue moon was sprawling out of its hiding place, limbs hanging over the shoulder of night after lovers had abandoned their bodies, laughing in the corners of each other. I was a full-tin lamppost staring at the sky's cheekbone, shy of stardust through the blinds of J-train tracks. This is how it feels to dream of being alive in East New York, Brooklyn, a concrete plant collecting whispers of bodega blues, darling sunrise tickles, drumbeat hips swaying through the air of Sassoon, and I envy the morning swag. Boomboxes hold our windows open in July. We face our fears on the cyclone called romance, a stroll along the boardwalk in Coney Island. Head nods pay respect on beat. Boys playing Scully in the street. We used to buy our kicks from City Line and roll a blunt for our fallen soldiers and spark a generation in love with spray cans and naked tenement buildings. Graffiti the spirits of hustlers with bubble letters. Mr. Softy Summers meant stealing Abuela Santo offerings for Tweety Bird on a popsicle stick, playing hopscotch on the broken sidewalk, eavesdropping on front stoop gossip, hair braiding fingers, dancing between strands of air. Brothers get caught and gangs get caught and barbershops get caught and street corners get caught, thrown against the hood of cop cars. Seen one too many handcuffs on the wrists of brown skin. We dock slave ships on our shores daily. No Rikers Island like a country home. I'm convinced that my father conceived me in Kings County arraignments while daydreaming of freedom. I owe my life. I owe my life. I owe my life to the woman who stopped my mother on the B-56 on her way to the abortion clinic and told her, you have a poet coming. This poem is called Jungle Gym. In Ashford backyards, hanging clothes on the laundry line, jam spill out the 70s radio from the kitchen windowsill. Swollen mosquito bites and scraped knees, dirty band-aids hang off scrawny elbows. We wash pit bulls with a water hose and shampoo soap suds flood the cracks in the concrete. Sun chasing the back of our shoulders. We tan in Newport smoke, sipping on sweating cups of Pepsi and freezer ice tray cubes. City kids claw toward the earth while adults build more buildings. We ran toward the trees, climbed fences, a marathon to connect to the world. Man-made, children with vivid visions empowered by inner rhythm. To know the difference between war and love, tolerance and respect. Loyalty was law. Manhattan was the government. I used to think all police officers were born in a jailhouse somewhere in Midtown and that the mayor fetched them on us come morning. We rose in split open skin, cruising the concrete on handlebars, sporting fresh knee scabs. The sidewalk armed with chalk illustrating inner city blood. And laughter lived through us. Foul-mouthed knuckleheads, careful, we were so careful not to die too young. Gap-toothed smiles guarding the graves of our greats. Metropolis moonlight mocks the Hudson River. Apartments turn their igneous light bulbs on, and the night blushes sapphire of incandescent stars flickering in buildings and bridges. Many love the mouth, murder secrets there, words heard throughout the city from the old gunmetal pigeon, hungry and flying over asphalt rivers. Who records the bird's eye, the testament of tenement rooftops, overlooking the millions? Piggybacking off of that, I recently, when I went to Cuba, I kind of told my grad, I got invited for a grassroots poetry festival, which is, Cuba's going through a lot of interesting changes right now. And at the time, it was still in the beginning of the changes. And I told my grandma that I was going, and I said, Grandma, do we have any family who are, what's out there? I want to know who's there. And she had said she left in '61 with my grandfather, and that's kind of all I really knew. And she said, well, I might have a brother. I haven't heard from him in years. I've been trying to find him. I don't know where he is. I asked her where we were from. We knew we were from Guantanamo. And she told me roughly where she grew up in the neighborhood. And I don't think she ever expected me to go and find our family. And so long story short, I did. I found her brother, who then told me about a sister she had there that she didn't know was there. And then that sister had Alzheimer's but had children. And those children I met, spoke to them. And they told me, oh, you have more family here. And I said, oh, wow. And then they proceed to tell me how my grandmother left 4 children behind. And we had no idea. So I found all these aunts and uncles. And it's a bit of the gravity, if you can understand, of folks who leave everything behind to start a new life, and the difficult struggle that people go through to come to this country, and some of the choices they make. And it took a lot for me to try to empathize and also understand where she made some of the choices. So this poem I wrote called Left Behind. What she do with her hands, she destroy with her feet. In those days, women did what they were told, she said. A valley rooted in the humid air of the world, where Trogon spectators recite and periwinkle toss over Guantanamo Sea. The scarlet-chested bird flies below a turmeric sun, discovers portals in the crops of sugarcane, snivels on her husband's finca. Where is the new Cupid fires? In the night, she shakes down the stars for few. A Kingston hummingbird comes to her in a dream. She swaddles her 9-month-old son in the arms of a maid. A daughter here, a daughter there. I will return, she said. Not before grandchildren, though. She grows. A poinciana tree grows in Brooklyn, shades both the pigeon and the owl. Men need search my heart. I am unimpressed by creatures without wings, for whom love is not a drifting, she said. Mother, mother is an earthly word beneath her.
Hands are something I'm kind of obsessed with. We talked a little bit about image and obsession in my workshop this morning, but just the idea that our hands, that every good thing we do begins with our hands, just as every bad thing we do also begins with our hands. And so if you think about the things you've done today, with your hands, if you just brush a piece of your hair back from your forehead right now, we do that all day, but if you were to actually do it and feel kind of that tenderness that your hands hold in them, But as well, hands are also the things that pull the triggers. And so hands are something that I find myself returning to again. These hands, if not God's, haven't they moved like rivers, like glory, like light, over the 7 days of your body? And wasn't that good, them at your hips? Isn't this what God felt when he pressed together the first beloved? Everything, fever, vapor, atman, pulses, finally a sin worth hurting for, finally a sweet, a you are mine. It is hard not to have faith in this. From the blue-brown clay of night, these two potters crushed and smoothed you into being. Grind, then curve, built your form up. Atlas of bone, fields of muscle, one breast a fig tree, the other a nightingale, both morning and evening. Oh, the beautiful making they do of trigger and carve, suffering and stars. Aren't they too the dark carpenters of your small church? Have they not burned on the altar of your belly, eaten the bread of your thighs, broke you to wine, to Eker, to nectarious feast? Haven't they riveted your wrists? Haven't they had you at your knees? And when these hands touched your throat, showed you how to take the apple and the rib, how to slip a thumb into your mouth and taste it all, didn't you sing out their 99 names, Zahir, Aleph, hands times 7, Sphinx, Leonids, Locomotura, Rubidium, August and September? And when you cried out, oh, Prometheans, didn't they bring fire? These hands, if not God's, then why, when you have come to me, and I have returned you to that from which you came, bright mud, mineral salt, why then do you whisper, oh, my hekatonchire, my sentimani, my 100-handed one? You guys are clappers. One of the things I often find myself writing about and returning to is that I have a brother who's addicted to meth, among other things. And we talked a little bit about this. A lot of the poems I'm reading toward my workshop students. We talked a lot about image, so that's kind of how I pulled out the reading for the night. But it was very difficult for me to write about something that emotional, something that close to me. And it took me finding an image that could hold the emotions I had for that brother. And so this is the title poem of the book. When my brother was an Aztec, he lived in our basement and sacrificed my parents every morning. It was awful, unforgivable, but they kept coming back for more. They loved him, was all they could say. It started with him stumbling along La Avenida de los Muertos, my parents walking behind like effigies in a procession he might burn to the ground at any moment. They didn't know what else to do except be there to pick him up when he died. They forgot who was dying, who was already dead. My brother quit wearing shirts when a carnival of dirty-breasted women made him their leader, following him up and down the stairs. They were acrobats, moving, twitching like snakes. They fed him crushed diamonds and fire. He gobbled the gifts. My parents begged him to pluck their eyes out. He thought he was Huitzilopochtli, a god half man, half hummingbird. My parents at his feet wrecked honeysuckles. He lowered his sword-like mouth, gorged on them, draining color until their eyebrows whitened. My brother shattered and quartered them before his basement festivals, waved their shaking hearts in his fists, while flea-ridden dogs ran up and down the steps, licking their asses, turning tricks. Neighbors were amazed my parents' hearts kept growing back. It said a lot about my parents, or parents' hearts. My brother flung them into cenotes, dropped them from cliffs, punched holes into their skulls like useless jars or vases, broke them to pieces and fed them to gods ruling the ratty crotches of street fair whores with pocked faces, spreading their thighs in flop houses with no electricity. He slept in filthy clothes smelling of rotten peaches and matches, fell in love with sparkling spoonfuls the carnival dog women fed him. My parents lost their appetites for food, for sons. Like all bad kings, my brother wore a crown, a green baseball cap turned backwards with the Mexican flag embroidered on it. When he wore it in the front yard, which he treated like his personal zócalo, all his realm knew he had the power that day, had all the jewels a king could eat or smoke or shoot. The slave girls came to the fence and ate out of his hands. He fed them mice through the chain links. My parents watched from the window, crying over their house-turned zoo, their son who was now a rusted cage. The Aztec held court in a salt cedar grove across the street where peacocks lived. My parents crossed fingers so he'd never come back, lit novena candles so he would. He always came home with turquoise and jade feathers and stinking of peacock shit. My parents gathered what he'd left of their bodies, trying to stand without legs, trying to defend his blows with missing arms, searching for their fingers to pray, to climb out of whatever dark belly my brother, the Aztec, their son, had fed them to. Run and gun. I learned to play ball on the res, on outdoor courts where the sky was our ceiling. Only a tribal kid shot has an arc made of sky. We balled in the res park against a tagged backboard with a chain for a net, where I watched a Wallapai boy from Peach Springs dunk the ball in a pair of flip-flops and slip on the slick concrete to land on his wrist. His fibula fractured and ripped up through his skin like a tusk, which didn't stop him from pumping his unhurt arm into the air and yelling, "Yeah, Clyde the Glide, motherfuckers," before some adult rushed him off to the emergency room. I ran games in the abandoned schoolyard with an 8-foot fence we had to hop, where I tore so many pairs of shorts on the top spikes, and where when my little brother got snagged trying to climb down, my cousin and I let him hang by the waistband of his underwear for an entire game of 11. And if that cousin hadn't overdosed on heroin a few years later, he might have proved us right and been the first res jump man. I got run by my older brother in our slanted driveway, the same brother I write about now, who taught me that there is nothing easy in our desert, who blocked every shot I ever took against him until I was about 12 years old. By then, his addictions had stolen his game. I learned the game with my brothers and cousins, with my friends and enemies. We had jacked up shoes and mismatched socks. Our knees were scabbed and we licked our lips chapped. We were small, but we learned to play big enough to beat the bigger, older white kids at the rec center on the hill, which to get to we crossed underneath the I-40 freeway, across the train tracks and through a big sandy wash. We played bigger and bigger until we began winning, and we won by doing what all Indians before us had done against their bigger, wider opponents. We became coyotes and rivers, and we ran faster than their fancy kicks could, up and down the court, game after game. We became the weather. We blew by them. We rained buckets. We lit up the gym with our moves. We learned something that was more important than fists, at least at that age. We learned to make guns of our hands, and we pulled the trigger on jumpers all damn day. And when they talked about the way we played, they called it run and gun, and it made them tired before they ever stepped on the court. Just thinking about a pickup game against us made the white boys from the junior high and high school teams go to sleep, and while they slept, we played like dreams.